Welcome to Classis Wisconsin Weekly. I'm here with Pastor Jim Kirk of Geneva Campus Church in Madison. Hi, Jim.
Hi. Glad to be with you.
I should have configured, you can't see this, but on my screen, you are to my left, and this is going to be all backwards. So when I look to you, I'm looking off the screen, so that's not configured well, but that's okay. Briefly, could you introduce yourself? How did you end up in Wisconsin? And then we'll dive into Geneva Campus's history.
Yeah, sure. Well, thank you so much for having me on. I think this is a great thing for our classes and to help us know one another better and what's happening in our area. So I first came to Wisconsin in 2002 to be a graduate student at the University of Wisconsin here in Madison. I'd already been to seminary. I had an MDiv, but I didn't believe at that time that God was calling me into pastoral ministry. I thought maybe I would be headed into seminary teaching or teaching in some capacity. So I came to Madison to study Hebrew and Semitic studies, Old Testament studies, and Semitic languages. And I did that for 6 years, working towards a PhD. I got a master's along the way. And throughout that whole time, I was just an active member at Geneva Campus Church and just very involved in the ministry and growing in leadership. Geneva was really the first church that welcomed me to really get deeply involved in the life of the church. And it's where I first did some of my first preaching and teaching. And in any case, it's not the first time that this has happened in the life of Geneva, but I discovered over that time that my real love was in ministry and in the life of the church. And I became increasingly dissatisfied with the academic track that I was on and felt a strong call to pastoral ministry. And so at some point, I actually felt like I need to make the decision to leave the PhD program and move towards becoming a pastor. So I went to Calvin Seminary for just one semester to seek ordination in the CRC, and came back to Geneva for about 6 months and served as an intern, and then went out to New York, where I served a Christian Reformed church in the Hudson Valley, about 2 hours north of New York City, for 4 years. Emmanuel CRC. And then I was involved in a church plant, planting a second congregation just outside New York City in Westchester County for another 4 years, partnering with a Presbyterian church there. And so then at the end of that time, I was called by Geneva to come back and to come on staff as associate pastor in 2017. So it was exciting to this church that had such an influence on me in formation, on my own, sense of calling and growth, to be invited back and to serve in this new way. And it's the same thing has happened before, because Pastor Mike Winowski, who is our senior pastor, was also a student here at Geneva, and then came back as the pastor, and he's been here for 18 years.
I don't know if I knew that about
we've sent
Mike.
out a lot of students, into ministry over the years.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
My trajectory is somewhat the same, because I was raised at Oostburg CRC, where I serve now. So there is that kind of special thing about serving a church that discipled you, and a blessing in many ways, and a strange feeling in other ways, to be discipling, in some sense, the people who discipled me. There's a beauty in it, but a strangeness in it, so that's great.
Yeah.
Well, tell me about what it means. We call it Geneva Campus Church, right? Is that the official title?
That is its title now, though many people still call it Geneva Chapel.
Okay.
Who know about the ministry from over the years. Could I give a little history?
Yeah, what does it mean to be a campus church? I mean, how does that come about?
Yeah, how does that happen? Yeah, so I think that the history of Geneva is just an amazing history of what God has done in Wisconsin over the last 50 years. And I would love for people to know more about it. Because Geneva started in 1968 as a group of students and faculty came together to start worshiping and doing Bible study on campus, most of whom at that point had Christian Reformed church backgrounds. And they were really looking for a Reformed witness on the UW campus. And for about 20 plus years, it was just a student faculty ministry. For some of that time meeting in the evenings and then slowly shifting to having a Sunday morning worship. And it wasn't until 1991 that it was organized as a congregation. And so for much of that history, and even after it was organized, it was really a ministry of our classes supporting a Christian Reformed campus ministry at the UW. And I think it was really owned like that. The classes was investing significantly financially, and there was just an awareness of this mission at the UW. And then, but as the Geneva was growing, it was known as Geneva Chapel for a lot of that time. Then after 1991, and it was organized as a church, it became officially Geneva Campus Church. And that made a lot of sense because it had begun gathering more families and people from the city, most of whom had a heart for students and for the campus, but also a lot of those faculty members who were a part of its early years had started to have kids who were growing up. And there was just, it was much more of a multi-generational church, but with just a heart for the campus and for student ministry. And what we found in the last 30 years is just that trajectory has continued, that Geneva's become more and more a multi-generational worshiping community with more and more people coming from the broader city, a lot more involved in the life of our city and in serving our schools and being involved in social justice projects, in partnering with different organizations. But we've tried to hold it together with this historic commitment to the university, to honoring the callings and vocations of people in the university, scholars and scientists and students, but also felt a sense of, wow, we have a lot of family ministry also going on, and how do we hold all this together? How do we function as a ministry for and to the campus, but also do all the things that a traditional church does to support its life and to reach out to its community? And it's an exciting, and all of that I find really exciting. And but we feel that tension very much at Geneva, and that's a lot of the questions that we're asking right now is, how do we hold this together, and what is God calling us to be going into the future?
What are some of the strengths to a church that has both of those things at the same time, a family intergenerational thing and a campus ministry?
Yeah, well, maybe I'll start by saying this is I love campus ministry most of all because as a follower of Christ, I'm the product of a campus ministry. I became a Christian as a junior in college, as a young philosophy student looking for the meaning of life. And it was a campus ministry that welcomed me in and was a place where I could wrestle with the big questions I had about whether there was a God and what that God might be like and how he'd revealed himself in Jesus. And so I just have a heart for for what happens in campus ministries and in student communities, where people are asking really hard questions about life and about where they're going and what God is calling them to. And I also think that universities in general and students are often on the leading edge of our culture. And so we know that we live in an increasingly post-Christian secular society. And I think that it's often in the university and among students that we discover what's coming next and what the emerging culture looks like. And so one reason why I think campus ministry is so exciting is that as the church reaches out into campuses, it's an opportunity to learn what it means to be a missionary church, a missional church that is learning what it means to be the church in a secular age. And that can be a big challenge, but it's also where we learn how to do that, how to engage in that mission. And really we're trained for it as we raise up leaders and we are answering that call. And so for a church like Geneva to be engaged in this work, I think it's a really revitalizing and renewing thing. Just to be present, even just the fact that we're present here on the UW campus, where we meet in a building, we rent space. We're a 50-year-old church that rents space still, and we meet right on and very near the campus. And just our presence here and the kinds of people who come through our doors and the kinds of questions they ask requires us to have that kind of missionary, outward-oriented mindset. And to me, that's a really vital and exciting place to be. It comes with challenges, but I really wouldn't be anywhere else. I love the energy that brings to us. So yeah, I mean, the kinds of questions we're asking for the future, though, are how do we do both? And how do we think, because really the pressure we feel could really be towards the family ministry and the broader city ministry that pulls us away from the mission of the university. We could easily move off campus right now and buy a really sweet building and have a lovely church. That wouldn't be hard for us. We've made the commitment up to this point to stay where we are, to stay very close to campus, which is challenging because downtown Madison, the prices are really high. But to do that for the sake of our relationship to the university. And so we're just thinking in terms of staffing and intent, how do we be intentional in that mission to keep it a vital part of who we are?
One thing, my friend, Pastor Brian, who lives across the street from me, not in the Classis, but still a friend at the Presbyterian Church, he talks about this verse, and I don't know the reference, but it's something like the men of Issachar understood the times or something like that. So he always says, "I want to be a man of Issachar." As a ministry and a church that, and I think you're right in saying that college age demographic is at the forefront of what's coming. As a ministry right there, if you were to be a man of Issachar for us, what advice would you give the rest of us who maybe aren't so close to the center? What's coming? What do we need to know? What good things, what bad things, what comes to mind?
Well, there's a well-known philosopher who's done a lot of study in recent years, and people have been reading quite a lot, and named Charles Taylor, who wrote a big book called A Secular Age. And Jamie Smith has helped a lot of people to understand his project and what he's doing. And a lot of what he is about is trying to understand, how did we go from a society in which 400 or 500 years ago, people just assumed that God existed, and you stood out if you didn't start from that assumption, to a society in which we live today, in which largely the starting point for many people is, of course, God doesn't exist, and you feel like you stand out if you believe that. And the working assumptions of our society have totally flipped on their head, and that's what he calls a secular age. And so, to me, I think this is one of the most important starting points, is that we get that really straight in what we assume about what people believe. And that even that whether they're raised in a very highly secular family like I was, where just God was never even talked about, or they were raised in a Christian family, but with the pressure of a secular culture always pushing in and raising these kinds of doubts and questions about what it means to believe. I think we, in everything that we do, we have to be just really mindful of that context and seek to communicate the gospel in a way that relates to those questions and challenges. And so that's what I try and do in my own preaching, is not assume, even for the folks I know in the congregation who are believers and have been for many years, I know that they have friends and are in, colleagues in their work who have very different sets of questions about how in the world could anyone ever believe this stuff, and try and be answering those questions in everything that we do, and showing that we're wrestling with those issues. And so I think the same for student ministry is, I think we want to be the kind of place where those questions are being, we're the kind of place where it's safe to bring those questions to the forefront and surface them, show that we're all aware, that we're all wrestling with them on some level, and then we're applying the gospel to them and showing how the Christian faith really does have answers to these questions, and that we do bring something that they're looking for.
I think a lot of people watching, at least certainly from my congregation, but I'd imagine around the Classis, a lot of people watching understand what it means to be a church. Fewer would understand what it means to be a campus ministry. Can you talk about what are some of the things you do to reach students on the campus? Is it weekly Bible study? Is it outreach? Is it what?
Yeah. So we I talk about it like this. I make a distinction between a campus ministry, a campus chapel, and a university church. So a campus ministry, strictly speaking, is super focused on a particular segment of students, or sometimes faculty, who they're trying to reach and build a community around. And so this is like InterVarsity or Campus Crusade or RUF. And these kinds of ministries are really important because they have the ability to reach those students and build the kind of focused student community that is needed on a campus. A chapel is usually owns a building and is growing a different kind of community that's more diverse, usually worshiping together on Sundays, but maybe not on over the summer or during breaks. And that's kind of what Geneva has often been in the past, is a chapel community, a worshiping community that's present in the university space, connected with other campus ministries, but also a distinctive kind of community. What Geneva has really become, and what we talk a lot about here now, is a university church, which is a multi-generational congregation that still has a heart for the university and is engaging the kinds of questions and challenges that university folks are dealing with. And so we partner with the universities and the crews and stuff on campus. We don't as much anymore have the same kind of student groups, at least right now. Our ministry has traditionally been more of a grad student and faculty ministry. Just for whatever reason, I find that there are churches that are really attractive to undergrads, and there are churches that are more attractive to graduate students and faculty. And we've always tended to be more of that sort. And so our primary, well, I'd say our primary ministry to students wherever they are is to just invite them into the life of the church and see them integrated with mentors and with seeing participation in and membership in a church during their college years or during their grad student years as an essential part of what they need in order to be fully formed Christians. The other thing, and so I think that's really important and really valuable in and of itself. The other thing that we do is we partner with other campus ministry groups, and one really vital partnership these last 3 years has been with a Christian study center here on campus called Upper House. And Upper House has been a really phenomenal growing ministry here, and we've really been able to come alongside them. And we've done a lot of different kinds of projects with them, but most recently that's come to focus on what we're calling the Geneva Forum. And so the Geneva Forum is an annual lecture series on campus that happens in February, where we invite in a Christian scholar, and there's a main lecture that they give, but then we try and build up other kinds of events around that, where they'll be meeting with small groups of students and faculty, both to model what it looks like to be a Christian scholar in whatever field, and to engage in whatever area of study that they're in. So later this afternoon, actually, I am meeting with a woman named Deb Harzma, who is a member of a Christian Reformed church, but she's also the president of BioLogos, and she's going to be our speaker for this upcoming year in February, speaking in the area of faith and science, and why it's so important for us to be engaged in that dialogue.
How can we pray for and support Geneva Campus Church?
Well, I would say pray for us in all our transitions. Like all our churches, this has been, enormously challenging to pursue our ministries under the circumstances of the pandemic. Yeah. Geneva is also going through a major transition as I become the lead pastor of Geneva, and Pastor Mike is moving towards retirement. So would be grateful for your prayers for that. And I'd say that the questions that I was talking about earlier about what is our identity and how do, as a university church, and how do we, not only Geneva, but as a Classis, continue to engage in this remarkable ministry to the University of Wisconsin. I mean, I think it's just amazing that our Classis and the Christian Reformed Church has had this witness on the UW campus for this past 50 years. And I just think it's so vital that it continue. And we're looking for ways in which for that to happen and really flourish and grow. And so we need a lot of wisdom as we ask those questions and take our next steps. So I'd be really grateful for prayer about that.
Yes, sir. Well, thanks for coming on, Jim. I know I told you 10 minutes and we've blown past that, but that's great.
I thought we were talking for an hour.
Oh, we got an hour? We got half an hour yet. Good. Buckle in.
Well, oh man, I could keep going. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for coming on, and we'll be praying for Geneva Campus Church and thinking of you guys in the transition. I don't know Mike as well as I know you. We work together on Classis Renewal Committee, but what I know of Mike is all wonderful things. I mentioned you actually at church this past week. It's Mission Emphasis Weeks here at Oostburg CRC, and you came and spoke for us. Was that 2 years ago already, or was it just last year? Maybe last year we didn't have guests.
2 years ago.
It was 2 years ago already. And you, I was actually missing that week, but I watched it back when I returned, and you had the passage from Luke 8 about the demons that go into the pigs. And Dave Kotzma was here this week and had the same passage for Mission Emphasis Weeks. And I just wondered, what, as these pastors, these proclaimers of the Word of God come in, why that's a recurring passage for us. So I've really been sitting with that, like, what is God telling us about this passage that we really need to hear, that this keeps coming up. So we're thinking of you, and watch that sermon back, and watch Dave's a couple times, and I'll try to link all that stuff and so people can see it and see what you guys are doing. So again, thanks for coming on.
Yeah, well, thank you so much, Jack. Love what you're doing. Talk to you soon.